All right, so today we're diving deep into Eckhart Tolle and specifically his book, The Power of Now.
Okay.
And, I know for some people this might sound, I don't know, maybe a little woo-woo
Mm.
well out there, but stick with us. Even if you're not, super into spirituality or anything like that, I think you'll find some pretty fascinating concepts here.
Yeah.
We're going to be pulling out some key excerpts from the book
Yeah.
and then really getting your take on what makes these ideas, I guess, so powerful and also so resonant.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, to really, I think, set the stage here,
Yeah.
it helps to know a little bit about Eckhart Tolle himself.
Yeah.
His story is actually pretty remarkable. He went from struggling with pretty intense anxiety and depression
Wow.
to having this profound spiritual awakening in his late 20s.
Oh, wow.
And, the interesting thing is, he didn't really set out to be a guru or anything like that.
Hmm.
It wasn't like he was looking for followers. It was more like his insights really resonated with people. And that's kind of how the power of now is born.
It's so interesting. He almost didn't want to be a teacher,
Right.
but clearly there's something in his message that just, I don't know, really struck a chord with people. I mean, think about it. Oprah's a huge fan. This book is a global bestseller. It's huge, even in India. That's got to tell you something.
Exactly. It speaks to the universality of his message.
Hmm.
At its core, the power of now is really all about recognizing the power of the present moment,
Okay.
the now, as the key to true peace and fulfillment.
Hmm.
And what's really interesting is it's not tied to any specific religion or dogma, which is probably why it appeals to such a diverse audience.
Right. Okay, so let's dive into some of these core concepts in the book.
Yeah.
One of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea that you are not your mind.
Yeah.
And he uses this really vivid parable. Have you ever heard of the beggar in the box of gold?
I have, yeah.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
So he uses that to really illustrate this point. And it made me think about, how often do we feel like we're searching for happiness,
Mm-hmm.
but we're searching in all the wrong places? Like almost like that beggar.
That parable is so brilliant because it really captures, the way most of us live our lives.
Yeah.
We're constantly chasing external things,
Mhm.
possessions, achievements, relationships, whatever it is,
Right.
thinking that that's going to bring us happiness.
Right.
But what Tully's saying is we're actually like that beggar, sitting on this treasure chest of inner peace and joy, completely oblivious to it.
Right. Yeah.
We're so focused on what's outside
Yeah.
that we completely miss what's already within us.
It's almost like we're programmed in a
Yeah.
way to look outward
Yeah.
instead of inward.
Yeah.
And then we just get stuck in that cycle of wanting,
Mhm.
but never really being satisfied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this concept of being comes in. Tolle argues that being is this state of deep connection to something far greater than our individual selves. It's
Yeah.
like the source of true joy and fulfillment.
Mhm.
And here's the really important part. It's accessible to everyone right here, right now.
So it's not about believing in a distant God
Right.
or achieving some kind of enlightenment in the future. It's about tapping into something that's already present within us.
Exactly.
Okay, but how do we even do that? I mean, when our minds are constantly buzzing,
Right.
thoughts and worries and to-do lists.
That is the $1,000,000 question.
Right.
And that's really where Tolle's insights about the mind come in. He's not saying that the mind is bad or useless. It's a fantastic tool.
Right.
The problem is we've become so identified with our thoughts that we've lost touch with that deeper awareness that lies beneath them.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, he says like 80 to 90% of our thinking is not only repetitive and useless,
Mm-hmm.
but often like downright harmful.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I can relate to that.
Really?
Like being stuck in your own head
Absolutely.
and going over, the same worries, the same anxieties over and over again.
That's the trap, I think, that so many of us fall into.
Yeah.
We let our minds run the show. And we end up feeling stressed, anxious, disconnected from the present moment. It's almost like we're living on autopilot.
Hmm.
Just going through the motions, missing out on the richness and the aliveness of life as it unfolds.
So how do we break free from that? Is it even possible to quiet the mind?
That's where the power of the now comes in.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Tolle makes this really important distinction between what he calls clock time, which
Yeah.
is, linear and sequential, like
Right.
the minutes ticking by on a clock,
Hmm.
versus psychological time, which is our mind's obsession with the past and the future.
That's a distinction that I'd never really thought about before, but it's so true.
Yeah.
It's like our minds are always time traveling, either dwelling on past regrets
Mm-hmm.
or worrying about what might happen in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all that mental time travel, it keeps us from fully experiencing the only time that truly exists, which is now, the
Wow.
present moment. It's in the now that we find true peace, true joy, true connection to ourselves and to the world around us.
Okay. I get that the now is important,
Right.
but how do we actually access it?
Mm-hmm.
It seems almost impossible to escape the pull of our thoughts.
It's definitely a practice.
Right.
It takes time and patience. But the first step is simply becoming aware of our thoughts,
Mhm.
not trying to suppress them or judge them, just observing them as they arise and pass away.
So we're not aiming for an empty mind.
Right.
It's more about becoming the watcher of their thoughts
Exactly.
rather than getting swept away by them.
Exactly. And as we practice this mindful observation, we begin to create a little space between ourselves and our thoughts.
Okay.
We start to see that we're not our thoughts, but the awareness that's aware of them.
And that awareness, that witnessing presence, that's the gateway to the power of the now.
I love how he calls it witnessing presence.
Yeah.
It's like we have this inner observer who can kind of step back and see the whole show
Mm.
without getting caught up in the drama.
And the more present we become, the more we tap into that creative potential, that aliveness that lies within us.
Hmm.
We start to align with the flow of life rather than constantly resisting it.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get this. So we're not our thoughts, the now is where it's at. Presence is the key to unlocking it all. But there's this other concept in the book that I'm really curious to explore. The pain body.
Yeah.
Sounds a little intense.
Ah, the pain body.
Yeah.
This is where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
And maybe a little unsettling, too. Tolle describes it as this accumulation of emotional pain that we carry around from the past.
So it's not like a physical thing, it's more like a psychic weight
Yeah, exactly, like an invisible shadow.
that's filled with all the unresolved hurt, trauma, negative experiences that we haven't fully processed. And here's the kicker. The pain body can actually influence our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
Wait, so it's like this unconscious force that's sabotaging our happiness
Yeah.
without us even realizing it. That's kind of scary.
It can be. The pain body thrives on negativity. It wants to keep us stuck in those old patterns of suffering. And the trickiest part is it often operates below the level of our conscious awareness. So you might find yourself reacting in ways that don't make sense,
Right.
or feeling inexplicably sad or angry without really understanding why.
It's almost like having this inner saboteur
Mm-hmm.
who's always whispering negative thoughts and trying to drag us down.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the pain body, it's a master manipulator. It knows exactly what buttons to push
Oh, yeah.
to trigger your deepest fears and insecurities.
So it's like we're unconsciously attracting more pain into our lives.
Yeah.
How do we break free from this cycle?
That's where the power of now comes in again.
Yeah.
By becoming present, by bringing our awareness to the present moment, we shine a light on the pain body and its patterns.
Okay.
We start to see it for what it is,
Mm-hmm.
an accumulation of old energy that no longer serves us.
So we're not trying to deny the pain
Right.
or suppress it. We're simply becoming aware of it, observing it without judgment,
Exactly.
and realizing that we are not defined by it.
Exactly. And that's the key to transformation.
Hmm.
When we no longer identify with the pain body, when we detach from its group, we reclaim our power and freedom.
Hmm.
We become free to choose a different way of being.
This is fascinating.
Mhm.
I'm already feeling like my understanding of myself and the world is kind of shifting a little bit.
That's the beauty of the power of now.
Yeah.
It offers such a radical perspective shift that can truly transform our lives.
Hmm.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface here. There's
Right.
so much more to explore in Tully's work. And we'll delve deeper into it after a short break.
All right. Sounds good.
It is amazing how these concepts, you start to think about them and they can really change your whole outlook. And it's not just about individual transformation either. Tolle talks about this idea of a larger shift happening, almost like a collective awakening of consciousness.
Okay. Now that is a mind-blowing idea.
Yeah.
What does he even mean by a collective awakening? Like, is he saying that humanity is on the verge of some kind of evolutionary leap?
That's exactly what he's suggesting. He describes it as a movement away from this dominance of the ego. It's a shift from separation to connection, almost like we're waking up from a dream of matter and form
Mm-hmm.
and realizing our interconnectedness with everything.
So it's not just about, me finding inner peace. It's about all of us evolving to a higher level of consciousness.
Precisely. And he's not saying it's going to be easy. In fact, he even suggests that our very survival as a species depends on this shift. Like we're at a crossroads, and the path we choose will determine the future of humanity.
That's both exciting and a little terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's also, I don't know, it also feels empowering in a way. Like if we all have a role to play in this shift, then our individual choices really do matter.
Absolutely. And the fact that we're even talking about these ideas, that they're resonating with people all over the world, it's a sign that this new consciousness is emerging.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
we're part of something much, much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to shift gears for a minute
Hmm.
and talk about relationships. Tolle has some pretty interesting things to say about how our egoic patterns kind of play out in our interactions with others.
Oh, relationships. Yeah, they're a perfect example of how our unconscious patterns can create so much drama and suffering. I mean, think about your own relationships for a second. How much easier would things be if you could just let go of the need to control the other person or to
Yeah.
change them?
Oh, man. Don't get me started. I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
Yeah.
Trying to make my partner fit some ideal in my head.
It's so common, though, isn't it? We project our expectations and our needs onto others, and then we get disappointed when they don't live up to them. What Tolle would say is it's because we're looking to our partners to complete us,
Hmm.
to fill a void within ourselves.
And then when they inevitably fail to do that, we blame them, we get resentful, and the whole cycle of conflict just starts all over again. It's like that push and pull dynamic that can
Exactly.
feel exhilarating
Yeah.
and exhausting at the same time.
We get caught in this dance of clinging and resisting, and it
Yeah.
creates so much unnecessary suffering. But Tolle, he offers a way out. He says the key to healthy, fulfilling relationships is presence.
Okay. So again, it comes back to the now.
Mm.
But how does presence actually change the dynamic in a relationship?
When we're present, we're not reacting to our partner based on our past hurts or our future fears. We're actually seeing them as they truly are in this moment. And that allows for a real connection, real intimacy to emerge.
It's like we're stepping out of those old patterns and creating space for something new to happen.
Exactly. And it's not about finding the perfect partner or trying to force the relationship to fit some ideal. It's about becoming more conscious within ourselves and bringing that awareness into our interactions with the other person.
This is really helpful. I can already see how applying these principles could make a huge difference in my own relationships. There's one more big idea I want to touch on before we move on, and that's surrender. It's a concept that comes up a lot in spiritual teachings,
Yeah.
but it can be a really hard one to wrap your head around.
Yeah, surrender is a tricky one, especially for the ego because it requires us to let go of control. It's about saying yes to what is, even when it's difficult or painful.
But isn't that just giving up? Like, if I'm unhappy with a situation, shouldn't I try to change it?
See, that's the ego talking.
Okay.
It wants to fix everything, to control the outcome. But what Tolle's saying is that often our resistance to what is actually what's creating the suffering. Surrender is about trusting that there's a deeper intelligence at work, even when we can't see it.
So it's more about aligning ourselves with the flow of life rather than constantly trying to swim upstream.
Precisely. Imagine you're in a canoe on a river. You can paddle furiously against the current, exhausting yourself in the process.
Yeah.
Or you can surrender to the flow, relax into it, and allow the river to carry you to your destination.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how surrender could actually be a source of peace
Mm-hmm.
and even liberation rather than a form of weakness.
It is counterintuitive, but often the most powerful thing we can do is let go. And Tolle believes that surrender can be a real catalyst for positive change in our lives. It's like we're making space for something new, something unexpected to emerge.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
We've covered so much ground already. Individual transformation, the evolution of consciousness, relationships, surrender. It's It's incredible how all these ideas connect and weave together.
It really is like a tapestry of interconnected wisdom. And
Yeah,
we haven't even touched on some of the more mystical aspects of Tolle's work yet.
I know. There's still so much to unpack. We'll be back in just a moment to explore even more of the power of now. Welcome back to our deep dive into Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. It feels like we've been on quite a journey so far.
Yeah, we have. And we've only just, I think, begun to explore the depth and the richness of Tolle's work.
One of the things that keeps coming up for me is this idea of interconnectedness. How Tolle really emphasizes that our individual consciousness is part of a larger universal consciousness. It's like we're all connected, like threads in this giant cosmic tapestry.
That's that's a beautiful way to put it. And it's such a radical departure, I think, from the ego's illusion of separation. Tolle's reminding us that on a deeper level, we're all part of the same divine essence, the same being.
So it's not just about, my personal awakening. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness with all beings and with the
Right.
universe itself.
Exactly. And that realization has, I think, profound implications for how we live our lives.
Yeah.
It calls us to move beyond that self-centeredness and embrace a more compassionate and interconnected way of being. It's like shifting from me to we.
It makes so much sense. It's like the more present we become, the more we start to see that interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah.
He also talks about how the world we experience is a reflection of our own consciousness. That's a pretty powerful concept.
It's so powerful. And, Toll suggests that if we want to change the world, we need to start by transforming our own inner state. If we're filled with negativity and fear, we're going to project that out onto the world around us. But if we cultivate peace and love within ourselves, that's what we'll see reflected back to us.
So it's not about trying to fix the world out there. It's about becoming more conscious and aware within ourselves and allowing that transformation to ripple outward. Like Dandi said, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Exactly. Tolle's message, I think, is ultimately one of empowerment. It reminds us that we're not, victims of circumstance,
Mhm.
but rather co-creators of our reality. We have the power to choose our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions, and those choices shape the world around us.
This is all so inspiring, but I have to admit it can also feel a little overwhelming at times. Like, where do I even begin? Are there specific practices that Tolle recommends for cultivating presence?
Absolutely. He offers a lot of practical techniques like focusing on the breath, becoming aware of the sensations in the body, practicing non-resistance.
Those all sound pretty simple, but I imagine they take a lot of practice to really master.
It's a lifelong journey, really. But the key is consistency. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing or body awareness each day can make a big difference.
And what about silence? Tolle seems to place a lot of emphasis on the importance of silence and stillness.
Silence is essential because it allows us to connect with that deeper dimension of being.
Yeah.
He even compares silence to the body of God and space to the mind of God.
Wow. That's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being quiet externally, it's about cultivating inner stillness and connecting to something larger than ourselves.
Precisely. And it's in that stillness that we find true peace, true clarity, and inspiration.
Another thing that really intrigued me was Tolle's interpretation of Jesus' teachings. He seems to view Jesus as a teacher of enlightenment, pointing to the same truth that he's trying to convey in the power of now.
Yeah, he definitely sees Jesus as a model of awakened consciousness, someone who fully embodied the power of the now. And he interprets, Jesus' teachings not as religious dogma, but as pointers to the transformative power of present moment awareness.
So it's not about believing in Jesus as a savior figure, but rather about recognizing the truth that he pointed to, that the kingdom of heaven is within us, here and now.
Exactly. Tolle is, I think, encouraging us to move beyond kind of those literal interpretations of religious teachings
Mm.
and tap into the deeper universal wisdom that they contain. He reminds us that all the great spiritual traditions are ultimately pointing to the same truth.
We have covered so much ground in our deep dive into the power of now. As we wrap things up here, what stands out to you as the most powerful or transformative takeaway from Tolle's work?
It's a good question. For me, it's really that invitation to step out of that time-bound, ego-driven state of consciousness that creates so much suffering for us. It's the reminder that true peace and fulfillment, they're available to us in this very moment. if we can only learn to quiet our minds and connect to the stillness within.
Yeah, beautifully said. And for me, it's the realization that we're not separate from the world, but rather co-creators of our reality. And if we want to see a more peaceful and loving world, we need to start by cultivating those qualities within ourselves. And if we can each bring a little more presence into our lives, imagine the ripple effect it could create.
It's an inspiring thought, isn't it? If the world is indeed a mirror of our collective consciousness, what does your world reveal about you? And what choices will you make today to create a more conscious and fulfilling reality? Not just for yourself, but for all beings. That's something to ponder as you go about your day.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. We encourage you to explore the book yourself and see what insights emerge for you. Until next time, happy diving.